Alma, Lagos is not what you think it is. It's a jungle, and not everyone survives. I will survive, Mama. I have to. Alma was a 22-year-old girl from Int'l with dreams larger than the vast of farmlands surrounding her home. One cool evening, Alma stood at the edge of the road, waiting for the bus that would take her to Lagos, the city of dreams, the land of greener pastures. Her mother's eyes, red from hours of weeping, bore into her soul. Alma, Lagos is not what you think it is. It's a jungle, and not everyone survives, she warned. I will survive, Mama. I have to, Alma replied, her voice trembling but resolute. When the bus groaned into Lagos at dawn, the city greeted Alma with an overwhelming cacophony of horns, chatter, and the distant hum of machinery. The air smelled of exhaust fumes and possibilities. She clutched her bag tightly, her eyes darting across the crowd of strangers, each moving with a purpose she had yet to find. The bus that carried Alma into Lagos seemed to be a world apart from the life she had always known. The further she traveled from Int'l, the more she began to understand that the journey ahead was far from a fairy tale. By the time she stepped into the city's chaos, Lagos felt like a beast with 1,000 mouths, hungry, loud, and unrelenting. Alma's first night in Lagos was a cold slap of reality. The tiny room she had rented in Int'l was barely habitable. The door creaked on rusted hinges, the windows were little more than holes, and the bed was a hard slab of wood. The air was thick with the smell of sewage from the open drains outside. Sleep came slowly that night as she lay listening to distant shouts, barking dogs, and the hum of generators fighting the constant darkness of power outages. By morning, the reality of survival hit her hard. She had only a few naira left after paying for the room. Her dreams of quickly finding a job seemed naive now. Lagos, it turned out, did not welcome newcomers with open arms. It was a city that demanded proof of your worth before granting you even the barest kindness. Alma joined the army of hawkers in the city. With a tray of bottled water balanced on her head, she ventured into the chaotic streets. The heat was unbearable, the traffic unending, and the constant shouts of "buy bottled water." Bottled water echoed around her. Her first day earned her just enough for a meal of rice and beans at a roadside buka. The next day, she pushed herself harder, running between cars in traffic jams and dodging Okadas, motorcycle taxis. She quickly realized that Lagos drivers were as ruthless as the city itself. More than once, she narrowly escaped being hit by impatient motorists. Her feet ached, her throat burned from inhaling exhaust fumes, and her hands were blistered from carrying the heavy tray. At night, her body felt broken, but her spirit refused to bend. One fateful evening, as she packed up after a long day, a group of area boys, street thugs, approached her. "Oh girl, bring your money," one of them barked, brandishing a broken bottle. Alma clutched her bag tightly. "Please, I don't have much," she pleaded. "Give us or we go wound you," another shouted. With trembling hands, she handed over her earnings for the day. They snatched it and ran off, leaving her in tears. The loss was not just of her money but of her sense of safety. That night, she sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the cracked walls of her room, wondering if she had made a mistake by coming to Lagos. In her third month, Alma thought she had finally caught a break. She met Chichi, another hawker who promised to show her the ropes of surviving in Lagos. Chichi seemed kind, sharing tips and even giving her advice on where to buy cheaper goods to sell. One day, Chi-Chi offered to introduce Oma to a supplier who could give her goods on credit. Oma, desperate for a better deal, followed her. The supplier turned out to be a scam. Chi-Chi disappeared with the little money Oma had saved, leaving her stranded and humiliated. The betrayal cut deep. Oma felt foolish for trusting so easily, but she learned a harsh lesson. In Lagos, not everyone who smiles at you has good intentions. When Oma's rent was due, she found herself unable to pay. The landlord, a burly man with no patience for excuses, threw her belongings into the street. "If you no fit pay, pack your load," he bellowed. For weeks, Oma slept on the cold floors of a church that allowed homeless people to stay overnight. Hunger gnawed at her belly, and shame weighed heavily on her shoulders. She avoided her family's calls, unable to bear the thought of admitting how far she had fallen. Her clothes became tattered, her once bright eyes dulled by hardship. She often stood on crowded streets, watching the city's wealthy stride past in their polished shoes and expensive cars, wondering if they even noticed people like her. One rainy evening, Oma stood under the leaking roof of a market stall, drenched and shivering. The weight of her struggles finally broke her. She sank to the ground, her tears mixing with the rain. "God, why did you bring me here? Why did you let me dream so big if you knew I would fail?" she whispered into the storm. But as the rain poured, something stirred within her, a flicker of defiance. She remembered her mother's words before she left, "Oma, you are stronger than you know." The city had tried to crush her, but she refused to let it win. The next morning, she rose with renewed determination. She returned to selling bottled water but began saving every naira she could. She avoided shortcuts, determined to rebuild her life the hard way. It was during this period that she met Uju, the catering worker who offered her a chance to assist at events. Oma grabbed the opportunity with both hands, working tirelessly to prove herself. Slowly, her fortunes began to change, but the scars of her suffering in Lagos would remain a reminder of the price she paid to chase her dreams. 5 years later, Oma returned to her village, but not as the naive girl who had left with dreams in her eyes. She arrived in a sleek car, wearing a tailored suit, her head held high. The villagers gathered, murmuring in awe. She had built a catering empire and now employed dozens of people. But Oma's greatest pride was not her wealth, it was her ability to inspire others. She opened a vocational training center in Int'l, offering young girls the chance to learn skills that could transform their lives. As she stood before the center, she looked at her mother, who was smiling through tears. "Mama, Lagos was a jungle. But I survived." Oma had found her greener pasture, not in the wealth she amassed, but in the lives she touched. Beneath the unforgiving lights of Lagos, she had forged her destiny. And now, she shone brighter than the city itself.